Hey there, friend. Welcome back to Daily Dose Radio here in the Bible Bistro. Well, this is your home for organic Bible study that's fresh and delicious. This is Daily Dose Radio, 5 minutes a day, 5 days a week, studying the Psalms verse by verse. And we have a good one today. Boy, I tell you what, Psalm 31 verses 3 through 5 is our study today. And there's so much here, but there are two things I definitely want to pull out today. First is in here in verse 3, and then the other is in verse 5, which is the confession or the words that Jesus spoke on the cross. So we'll talk about that today and look over in Luke chapter 23. Before we get there, though, let's go ahead and read our passage, 3 through 5, Psalm 31. For thou art my rock and my fortress. Therefore, for thy name's sake, lead me and guide me. Pull me out of the net that they have laid privily for me, for thou art my strength. Into thine hand I commit my spirit. Thou hast redeemed me, O Lord God of truth. All right, so that is Psalm 31, verses 3 through 5. And one of the things that I really wanted to bring out here in this third verse is we have the reason. We have the reason explained to us why he puts his trust. You'll notice in verse 1, he says, "In you, O Lord, I trust." So we understand that. In you, O Lord, I trust. And then we have the reason for that trust in verse 3. For, anytime you see that word for or because or according to, sit up and pay attention to it. It's an important preposition. And here we have the word for, you are my rock. Whenever we trust in the Lord, you are always comes before you have. You are always comes before you have. And he says, I've put my trust in you. He makes the request there in verse 2, be a strong rock to me, a house of defense to save me. So he makes that confession, or that prayer, but then in 3, he gives us the reason why he trusts and the reason why he prays, because God is. You are my rock and my fortress. So that's always the condition of our trust. We're not trusting in something that's intangible. We're trusting in something real, eternal, and heavenly. And that trust always begins with you are. And later on we'll have you have. Later on, the thing prayed for and trusted in will appear. So we have there, that's in verse 3. And then we have there in verse 5, or in verse 4 rather, pull me out of the net that they have privately laid for me. Again, remember, this is about Christ and the cross and his passion. And you look at verse 4 and you say, well, that fits perfectly into the passion narrative. Pull me out of the net that they have laid privately for me, because they did that behind closed doors. You are my strength. Again, you are, for you are my strength. And then verse 5, into thine hand I commit my spirit. Thou hast redeemed me, O Lord God of truth. So into thy hand I have committed my spirit. Look at Luke chapter 23 in verse 46. When Jesus had cried with a loud voice, he said, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. So you see, him repeating this psalm makes it his. This is obviously a quotation from Psalm 31. And whether or not the tradition is right or not, that he was praying from 22 to 31:5, it was still, goodness, there's so much about the cross in these psalms. And here it is again. Into thy hands I commit my spirit, he says. And he gave up the ghost. It says there in verse 46 of Luke 23. So he begins in 22 and he ends in 31:5. And in 31:5, we have him not only ending his reading of the psalm, but also his life comes to an end there for a moment, because God is going to redeem him. He will not suffer his Holy One to see corruption, as Peter said, quoting from Psalm 16. Okay, so this quotation of Psalm 31:5 on the cross makes it his and tells us what the subject of this psalm is. It is a prayer of Christ while he's on the cross. All right, well, join me again next time, and we're going to look at verses 6, 7, and 8 here on Daily Dose Radio.